You know, if you listened to the show on Friday, you would have heard a brief segment about halfway in where we discussed a recent census report which shows that the white population in this country has declined for the first time in American history. Whites have dipped below 60% of the overall population, another first. And among young Americans, racial minorities are now the majority. Now, I say we discussed the report, but really we discussed more so the reaction to the report, which was positively rapturous on the left. The most blatant example was Jennifer Rubin with the Washington Post, who exclaimed that the diminishing number of whites is fabulous news. And elsewhere, the celebration was couched in more sanitized language, but was nonetheless apparent. So take this article from a guy named Peniel Joseph with CNN, who scolded the white people who are worried about the census data, labeling them all white supremacists, to include Tucker Carlson, of course. And Joseph then wrote, "And yet, America's changing demographics tell a different, more inspiring story. Rather than a narrative of white decline, what if we saw in this data the increasing numbers of racially blended families and mixed-race children and understood them as signs of a more racially diverse, economically just, and culturally rich future?" Now, it is, he says, inspiring for there to be fewer white people around. It is more just and more culturally rich, he says, which is obviously to say that a whiter country would be culturally impoverished and less just. This is how the left has generally framed it. To be a less white country, by their telling, is to be a manifestly better country. That's why they celebrate the decline of the white population. It's why they actively seek to facilitate that decline in terms of percentages by inviting unchecked immigration across the southern border. It's why they're very concerned about making sure that white people have less institutional power and are really clear about that. That's what they want to do. They put policies like affirmative action into place to achieve that end. Now, I said on Friday that although this is all obviously true, and they don't make any attempt to hide it, even so, you're not allowed to point out that any of this is happening. If you do, you'll be accused of engaging in the allegedly white supremacist replacement theory. I also predicted during that segment that Media Matters would post that same segment and accuse me of advancing white supremacist conspiracy theories. Well, like a prophet of old, I had correctly predicted the future once again. So later that day, after that segment aired, Media Matters published this. They say, on YouTube, Daily Wire host embraces white nationalist conspiracy theory. Now, our friends at Media Matters are nothing if not predictable. But it wasn't just them. A woman named Robin Panaccia over at the Wonkette blog posted an article titled, "Matt Walsh Scared We Are Secretly Trying to Replace Him and All Other White People." Then she goes on, "Many years ago, when we were all so much more innocent, the only people who believed in the great replacement theory were neo-Nazis. And when you tell normal people about this, even normal people who were themselves kind of racist, they would be pretty surprised that it was a thing, mostly because of how it sounds ridiculous and also is in fact ridiculous. But Matt Walsh doesn't think that only rabid white supremacists should be able to indulge themselves in absurd racist fantasies in which they are the truest victims. He wants tactful, suit-wearing white supremacists to have that opportunity as well. Why limit oneself, really?" Now, I'll take a quick step to the side here to say that I'm not worried about this lady or Media Matters calling me a white supremacist. That term has no meaning. I'm sure Robin would call the barista at Starbucks a white supremacist if he misspelled her name on her cup, which, by the way, they probably do all the time, incidentally, because her parents injected an unnecessary Y into her name, a move that doomed her to a life of writing whiny, poorly constructed blog posts like this one. The point is that these people find white supremacy around every corner and in every crack and crevice of the earth. To them, I'm a white supremacist because I exist, and I'm white, and I lapse sometimes into the nasty habit of expressing my own opinions rather than their opinions. So the label could not be more irrelevant to me. With that said, I do take exception to the claim that I am tactful and wear suits. Those latter accusations are entirely without basis, I assure you. In any case, reading a bit more here, after extensively quoting me, Robin writes, quote, "Whenever anyone says you can't talk about this, they rarely mean that no one can talk about it. They just mean that if they talk about it in the way they're talking about it, people will think they're super racist," which is a very fair conclusion to reach almost any time Matt Walsh's mouth is open, and he's not just saying things about women. We're letting people into America to escape bad conditions in their home countries. It's not for the purpose of replacing white people. No white people are being murdered in the process of immigration happening. Well, that's kind of news to me. As far as universities and positions of power go, no, these can't all be for white people. That's not white genocide. That's just sharing. White people are not entitled to have all of the positions of power. It's not replacement. It is making things more fair. If one does think that white people do have that intrinsic right, then they are in fact white supremacists. Oppressors have always seen those they sought to oppress as a threat. This is nothing new. The best way to preserve an unjust hierarchy is by convincing those at the top and in the middle that if those on the bottom get any power, they'll turn around and do some oppressing themselves, if only as an act of revenge. Now, so it's a review, in case you're lost at this point. It is a racist conspiracy theory to say that white people are being replaced. That's not happening at all. It's completely false. How dare you? At the same time, there is a racial hierarchy in this country, and white people are at the top of it and are by their nature oppressive, and it's therefore important to, well, replace them with non-white people. Indeed, the people complaining about being replaced are racist for not wanting to be replaced and also for claiming that they are being replaced because they totally aren't being replaced, even though they are, and it's good, and they should like it, but it's not happening. Make sense? No? Well, of course not, because the incoherence is entirely by design. Now, back in Realityville, there is no racial hierarchy. That's not what this is about. The hierarchy exists in the imagination of women with unnecessary Y's in their names. The real point, is simply that, at least partly as a result of deliberate policy choices and the actions of our most powerful cultural institutions, the overall percentage of white people in the country and of white people admitted into universities and placed in positions of power and so on is being reduced. And non-white people are being placed into those vacated areas. I think you could really call that replacement, but if you don't like replacement, that's fine. Let's put that to the side. How about a different R word? How about reduction? Can I call it white reduction? I mean, nobody can deny that there's a significant amount of white reduction taking place, both in the population and especially institutionally. Now, so we're talking about white reduction. The question, is it good to celebrate this? And to answer that question, all we need to do is imagine how it would sound for someone to celebrate the reduction of any other race of people. What if I was to react to news about a reduction in the black population by describing it as fabulous? Now, you'll argue that it's different because black people are in the minority, but why should that make it different? The point is that, minority or majority, we should not treat any race as a pestilence that needs to be cured. You know, to treat any race as a problem to be solved, a plague to be contained, is unimaginably, unspeakably racist. And if you're really getting hung up on the minority aspect of this, then fine. Imagine that I were to celebrate the reduction of the majority race in any non-white foreign country. So let's take any non-white foreign country where non-white people hold all of the systemic power. And then imagine that I were to tell you that this majority race is being supplanted by a minority race and that this is great news. Now, you would surmise that I'm obviously racist against the majority race. You would ask me questions like, well, why are you celebrating that exactly? I mean, what's wrong with that race being the majority? Why have you decided that it shouldn't be? Why is it a problem? What are you so excited about? What don't you like about these people? And if I responded that the majority race is naturally oppressive and inherently bigoted, and that's why there needs to be less of them, you would only become firmer in your conclusion that I am nothing but a ranting, raving, drooling bigot. And you would be right in that case. And that's the point. Okay, white people are not entitled to positions of power. That's true. And nobody is saying they are. That's not the point. Here's what I'm saying about white people. Here is my radical statement. And Media Matters, here's the part that I want you to clip. Because you're basically my PR team at this point. I tell you to clip something and post it, and you do, which is great. So clip this one. Here's what I'm saying about white people. This is my extreme claim. White people have the same moral worth as anyone else and are therefore entitled to the same respect. So any language that would sound horrifically racist when applied to other races is just as horrifically racist when applied to whites. That's what I'm saying. I am the one advocating for equality here. Treating all races the same, with moral worth. And we don't talk about them like they're diseases to be reduced and contained. Robin and Media Matters, they're the ones who want to treat white people as a special case. if only for negative reasons. And that is why they are today, certainly, canceled. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.